So one of the final pieces I've been waiting for before I can start the engine has arrived. This is my rebuilt Magneto. As I mentioned, thanks to Paul at Marlborough Magnetos, who rebuilt this for me and did an amazing job. Everything on it was worn, apparently, so he's gone through and made it all good again. I have attached the housing and also the shaft and the gear. So one of the modifications Paul made for me was to fit a modern oil seal up in here, because otherwise you can get problems with oil getting up into the works and causing problems. The only thing I had to do then is the oil seal actually sits down a little bit further than the original felt seal. So I had to machine a tiny amount, maybe 20 thou, something like that, off the back of the tapered shaft that fits onto the dynamo drive. So that's all done now. I was also told you can fit a washer to act as an oil slinger, but I'm not quite sure where that's supposed to go. The only place it fits is there, so I'm assuming that's where it goes. And the idea of that would be that sits there on the shaft and I guess rattles around, and any oil that tries to go up there gets flung off. I'm pretty sure that's where that needs to go. Like I say, it won't fit anywhere else, so hopefully that's okay. I also fitted the bush in here. That was all fine. The hole was already more or less big enough. I just kind of had to clean it out a little bit, and I used Loctite to fit that bush inside there. So that should all be fine now. The Magneto is all nice. He made up a new plinth thing here. And one thing he pointed out to me is this is how you adjust the advanced retard from inside the car. So the lever on the steering wheel goes down the shaft through the steering column, and then there are linkages that link from the bottom of the steering column up to this on the Magneto, which controls your spark advance. And you can probably see somebody has modified this in the past. They've sort of hacked this away a bit to make it travel further. So I'm not sure that actually does anything. So I just do need to make sure when I put all this together that I have stops in the right place so that it doesn't go further than it needs to. And I'm still trying to get my head around which is fully advanced and which is fully retarded. So I think that's fully retarded and this is advanced. I'm not sure exactly which way around this goes. It should make more sense once it's on the car. So that's the focuses. So that's the Magneto done. That will go on the car. I need to make up the plug leads and things. So the Magneto bolts on here, driven off the cam gear. And the other thing I have done is I tidied up the pedal shafts and shortened those, and I made up the right spacer that I needed in between the pedals here. So that actually turned out to be a little bit tricky because this shaft, even cut down like this, you can't get it into the gearbox without lifting the gearbox up. The chassis rails get in the way. So what I did was I had to jack up the engine to lift the gearbox up, and I was able to get it to lift up just enough that this shaft would clear the top of the chassis rails. I basically just marked it and cut the ends off with the angle grinder, and then I squared the ends up in the mill because the diameter of this, I think it's about 22 millimeter diameter, which is what, 7/8, something like that. It's too big to fit in my lathe. So I was able to set it up in the mill just to get the ends nice and flat. I ended up cutting a section off both ends. So this end is cross-drilled and there are holes inside there so you can grease the pedals. And I cut off the last hole because this has come from a saloon car. The accelerator pedal would usually be on there as well. So I cut a little piece off this end so that the holes matched up with the pedals here. And I then ended up having to cut off You can just see it there. A little piece on that end as well, and then cross drill it for the split pin. I also drilled another cross hole on this side to get grease, because this is quite wide, this pedal, so there's holes either end of that to get grease up inside there for the brakes. And I also machined up another one of these sort of washers that hold that steady linkage in place. So that's all now in place. That's bolted on, and then there's a grease nipple on the end, so I can get grease inside there and grease inside there. So that's all looking pretty nice, and it seems to work fairly well. I still haven't run the brake cable, but that's still left to do. I did have to paint the handbrake shaft, which is that shaft running along there. I needed to remove that anyway, because you have to fit that through the support bracket here, and I need to get the bolts for that so I can actually clamp that in place. I need to figure out exactly where along the axle it goes, because obviously with that in place there is a particular spot where this length matches the distance between the torque tube and the handbrake rod. So that's looking pretty good. Just realized I haven't actually put one of the nuts on the gearbox here. This isn't all bolted on properly, so I need to bolt all that up properly. With the magneto in place, I need to set the timing, and I'm still figuring out exactly how you do that, but basically the books say you set it so that it's statically timed at top dead center on cylinder 1. And I did mark on the flywheel where that is, more or less. So I know when that's in that position, that should be top dead center on number 1. I need to make sure it's on the compression stroke, of course. And I thought I was being clever by putting that mark there. But then I realized when I'm turning the handle, standing over here, I can't see that mark, which is when having a mirror comes in handy. So I can sort of prop that up here and then turn the starting handle to get things in the right position. What I'll actually do to make sure I'm really on top dead center is put some sort of dial indicator down in there so I can see when it's in the exact right place. And with the magneto bolted on, I can make up my spark plug wires. I need to do that. I need to make up a kill switch for it, which is just a simple switch out of the cap that earths out the magneto. And you also need to make sure the magneto is right at the point where the points are opening. And you can't do that with a simple test light like you can with a distributor. Because of the way the magneto works, you've got coils and capacitors and points and things all in parallel. So there are ways to do it. I'm actually going to play with an idea for a little circuit I saw that makes a little test box. They call it a magneto buzzer, I believe, and they use it on aircraft to set up the magnetos on that. And often in aircraft you've got 2 magnetos, so you have to set them both up the same, and they use these little buzz boxes. So just as an experiment, I'm going to try making one of those and see if that helps. But then once I get this all timed, I'm guessing I can then just basically fill up the fuel float bowls on the carburetor and see if the thing actually fires. Won't be able to run it for long, there's no cooling system, but if I can do that, I can at least see that everything is going to work and know that I'm good to continue. Out in the shed again, playing with my magneto. Now that the clocks have changed, it's only 6:30 here, but it's dark and it's getting cold. So I came out and I have bolted the magneto on, and I discovered another one of these instances of there not being a lot of space on these Riley Brooklyns, and I had to bend my Y pipe because it was hitting the top of the magneto there, This isn't just a Brooklands problem. I guess that's a problem on all Riley 9s. There's not a lot of room on these things. But I have bolted the housing in place. There's a gasket there with gasket goop to stop oil leaking out. And I also remembered to drill the little hole that seems to be in the side of the bush there. And I think what that's for is so that oil getting flung off the timing gears here will actually go into that bush. So I made sure that was all nice and clear. And that's bolted on there now. You can see, well, you probably can't see, but this flange, this mounting flange, there are holes in the Magneto and there's actually slots in there, which is what lets you adjust the position of the Magneto slightly. You can rotate it on the housing. It's a bit stuck at the moment. There we go. It's a nice tight fit, so there's a lot of stiction there. And that lets you fine tune the timing for the actual Magneto body. And the way this is supposed to be timed is number 1 piston on top dead center, and that's when the points should just be opening. It's actually quite hard to see when the points are opening and closing. I will have a look at making my little device that I can put across there so you know when they're actually open and closed. I do have the number 1 cylinder at top dead center. I can tell by my timing mark on the back, and you can also check by making sure both the inlet and exhaust valves have clearance. And that's one thing I have noticed is with these bolted down for a little while now, it seems like that clearance has opened up. I'm not sure if that's because of the gasket compressing. I should check these bolts, these nuts are all tight, but I will go through and recheck all my valve clearances before I try running the engine. So I'm just trying to figure out the actual position of the timing here and what this modification somebody's done on the lever here is. So they've opened it up on here. So normally the lever would only go from here to there. And what they've done is they've opened it up so it'll actually go further back. And when I was first looking at this, I wasn't actually sure which direction this rotor rotates. It actually goes that way, so it's anti-clockwise. And you can see, hopefully, this ring here is kind of an eccentric ring. And that's what these points are opened and closed by. So you can see it basically rides on this like a little cam. You can see it's not even touching it there, and then it comes up onto this cam, and that's what opens the points. So you can sort of see can you see the points opening and closing there. Now, because this is rotating this way, and I have to think about this, which is why I'm filming it, because if I've got this wrong, somebody can point it out to me. As you rotate the Magneto housing anti-clockwise, so towards the head, like that, you're retarding the timing because the peak, the opening, is moving later. So if we reset that there, and then you can see how the advanced retard lever that works off the steering wheel behaves. So if we move that back, that's now, let me see, as I say, I have to think about this. That's moving the peak around, so it'll happen sooner, I believe. So if this is the most retarded position, then going that way will advance it because the peak's going to happen sooner. So if this is everything at top dead center, and this is going around this way, if I move that peak back, the points are going to open before top dead center, which is advanced. So that is correct. So I believe what somebody was trying to do here was, because I can change the position of all this, it all depends on where the gears mesh and how much rotation you've got on the body here. I think they increased it in the retarded direction like that to give more advance, basically. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. It's a bit of a hack. I'll have to look up what what it actually says about that, but I could probably measure that angle and figure out how many degrees that actually is. Well, it's a bit hard to judge from that, but if that was, what would that be? Nearly 45 degrees, around there, which I think sounds like way too much. So normally the lever would only go from there to there. So it's interesting. I need to, as I say, I need to play with it and figure out exactly where the right position is. But that's pretty close. You can see that is opening about there. And that's open there. So that would be advancing it, and that would be retarding it a lot. So that's what I have to figure out. And again, you can see there's not much clearance here. I have to get a spark plug wire to come out of there and up into here. So that's going to be a bit tight. These are just screw terminals, so that isn't too hard to figure out. The other thing I have to make sure is, of course, that the rotor is pointing to number 1. So you want the rotor under here. Actually, that's going to be tricky to take that off when it's in place like that. I don't know if there's enough clearance here to get these nuts off and actually get the distributor cap off. I'm assuming it's still called a distributor cap on a Magneto. I did notice on these before, when I initially got it back and had a look at it, that one of the studs that this is attaching to, it's longer on one side than the other. They also seem to be far longer than they really need to be. That's one. Just. So if we take that off, yeah, so you can see I haven't got this lined up. So this is the spark gap, and you can see the little contacts in there. So one of these is actually marked number 1. So I need to make sure I know which way round this goes as well. So it's all a little bit fiddly when you've never seen one before. And we can see which direction it rotates. If I turn the engine over, so you can see this is going that way, and that's actually going that way because of the gearing. I have to be a bit careful doing that, of course, because this thing will be sparking, and I don't think you really want it sparking with no plugs in there. So I have to remember to line this up, get this back onto top dead center, line this up on number 1, and then adjust from there, I think. Like I say, I'm figuring this out as I go along, so I'm getting pretty close now, but it may be a job to finish off tomorrow. Started to get a bit cold, and I've got a little bit of a cold as well. So this is kind of doing my head in a bit at the moment. When you look at the distributor cap, it's quite hard to tell where the number 1 position is because the contacts don't line up with the terminals. You can see that's the number 1 contact there. So I think that means when this is sitting on the Magneto, it needs to be somewhere there. There don't seem to be any marks or anything on this, so I'm not sure how you know when it's pointing in the exact right place. So that's kind of interesting. But with the cover off, you can see what effect rotating the body has. You can see that the gear's moving, the position's moving. The other thing that makes this difficult is the gears on this have helically cut. So because it's a helical gear, when you mesh the gears, when you drop the magneto on, it rotates because it slides down onto the timing gear. So you kind of have to set this a little bit around, and then as you drop it on, it rotates around until it's fully seated. So given this is on number 1 top dead center, and I think that's pointing at number 1 plug, you can see it's actually marked on the case there. There's a little 1 on there. That's actually interesting because you can see, and this seems to happen a lot on old cars, there's a number 1 scratched into the top of it, but there's also 3 little lines filed into it. This one has 1 little line. So people do all sorts of weird things on old cars. But when I look at it, if this is top dead center pointing at number 1 plug, then the points are nowhere near opening at all. You can see this isn't even on the cam. So I'm wondering if what I need to do is, this comes off, and you can see there's a screw there, and you can adjust this. So what I am thinking is that probably needs adjusting so I can rotate this around. But I think that's probably going to be a job for tomorrow now. I'm going to leave this how it is, go and do a bit more research and see if I can figure out how this all actually works.